Hi, this is Bishop Manigault. Welcome to Bishop's Corner. Thank you for being with me today. I want to share just a word with you. If you recall in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, we learned there about Paul's thorn in the flesh. Paul having sought the Lord on more than one occasion for what he called his thorn in the flesh. He gets an answer from the Lord that he actually did not expect. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9, we have the Lord's answer. And he said unto me, My grace is sufficient for thee. My grace is made perfect in weakness. My brothers and sisters, just because we ask the Lord for something does not mean that he has to give us what we ask for. Just because we pray for something that is a good and a right thing does not mean that God has to give us what we pray for. The Lord always gives us what is best for us and what is consistent with his will for our lives. And we see this in example with Paul. So the question before us is, are we willing to receive from God what he wants from us? Are we willing to accept his plan for our lives? Are we willing to let him be God over us and do with us and through us what is in his will for us? See, Paul asked for healing, deliverance. He asked for a relief from the condition and the situation in which he found himself. God's answer was grace that is sufficient. God's answer was strength that enabled him to endure the condition and the situation, not relief from the situation and the condition. He gave him grace that's sufficient and strength to endure. The strength, however, that worked this in Paul was the strength of God. It was a strength that came to him through his weakness. The strength that works in Paul was despite his own weakness, despite his own inability to come to terms with his condition and his situation. That's how God's strength works. It works in the time of our inability to overcome, and through our inability to overcome helps us, in fact, to do just that. The weakness in view here that Paul uses that word is Paul's term for the frailties of human existence. And it's his term for the adversities of life in general. The insults, the hardships, the persecution, the disappointment, the sorrows, and all of those things that impact us in so many ways. God's grace is sufficient for all of these things, and his strength to enable us to get through and go through works through those very times that we are most vulnerable and most weak. So the point of the text is to remind us that God's grace is sufficient for every circumstance. His grace is sufficient for every challenge and every care of life. God's power is made perfect, the text says, in weakness, in human weakness. God's power is not limited by our weakness. In fact, God works in and through that very weakness to still accomplish his will for our lives. Let me say that again. God's power is not limited by our weakness. In fact, it works through and despite that weakness to still accomplish his will for our lives. And that's why Paul confidently says in the end of verse 10 of that text, for when I am weak, I am strong. God's grace is sufficient, and despite my own weakness, because of the power of God in my life, I can then what? Do all things through Christ that gives me strength. So be encouraged in the Lord and rest in the power of his might, knowing that our God's strength is made perfect even through our weakness. God bless you. My time is up, but I do thank you for yours. Have a blessed day.